Greetings, my brothers and sisters. Sending gratitude to all of you who are joining in today to accompany us down the rabbit hole of self-exploration through plant medicines. My name is Ryan Sprague, and I'm here to tell you that your frequency is now set and tuned to explore psychedelic medicines and the impact they've made among the countless psychonauts exploring the last true frontier. Buy a ticket and take the ride with me as we get true first-hand accounts of the experiences, benefits, risks, and transformations taking place within the ever-expanding world of psychedelic medicines on This One Time on Psychedelics. One thing I believe we all truly seek at our core is the ability to feel whole. This being said, the lack of feeling whole is arguably one of the biggest challenges in modern-day society. We have thousands of friends on social media, more distractions and shiny lights than ever, and yet this problem has only gotten worse as we've continued to stray away from the true nature of our being in place of what we have been programmed to believe will lead to true fulfillment and wholeness. For me, I don't know if there is one solution to this multifaceted issue, but one thing I know is that by reconnecting to the natural world, we can set in motion a chain of events that will begin to allow us to remember who and what we truly are. And, in my opinion, one of the most effective and practical tools to deepen our connection to nature is the idea of microdosing psilocybin. Microdosing, as opposed to macrodosing, allows us to experience the magic of medicines such as psilocybin without having to have deep experiences that, for many, are not desired. Today's guest on the show is a man who knows the power and potency of microdosing routines in one's life, as he has experienced this magic firsthand, not only in his own life, but also in the lives of numerous clients within his one-on-one mentorship work and his Microdosing Mastermind. Within the Mastermind specifically, his mission is to empower his clients to take full ownership of their habits, health, healing, and happiness through equipping them with the tools to do so and the necessary support to achieve any and all goals they create for themselves. Be prepared to have your mind expanded to new horizons surrounding what is possible in the realm of microdosing and beyond, as I welcome my man Jeremy Abramson to the show. Jeremy, what is up, my man?
Dude, that was the best introduction anyone has ever given me. Holy shit. Dude, that first quote that you said was, who was that quote from?
That came through me 40 minutes ago. I got home I visited my mom, and my process is usually what I'll do is I'll sometimes make a little bit of CBD bag in a volcano, right? Something like that. Get myself a little bit different of a perspective, and then I'll put carbon-based life forms on, specifically that group, and I'll put on a song called A Seed, right? And somehow it just helps me channel emotion. And then I connect to you. Like I looked you up one more time, like really tuned into like your pictures and your website. Your whole website's amazing, by the way. You had whoever did that is amazing. And I just felt your energy, and I just like felt what would be relevant for today's episode based on what you had in there and just like what I felt around you. So I'm really glad you enjoyed it, man. That's awesome.
Yeah, dude. No, I really appreciate you taking that time and putting in that intention. I'm doing super well, man. Really excited to drop in with you and bring some value to your amazing audience and talk about the magic of microdosing and other potential modalities that we can implement to really just elevate all areas of life.
Man, it's so cool. And, guys, for those listening or watching, Jeremy and I were nerding out a little bit beforehand because we have a lot of similarities in our journey, not only with like our passions, but also like the strategies we have found to be able to not only connect more to ourselves, but also be able to like, be of service, right? Tap into our sacred work and these kind of things. And, Jeremy, one thing I'm really curious on for you, man, and I know some of this part, but I'd love to hear it from you and of course to the listeners too. It's like, I'm curious how you first found psychedelics, microdosing specifically. Like, how did this all transpire? Did you dabble in the past or was this a completely new thing for you? Tell me everything, man.
Yeah, it's a good question. So I guess my first experience with any sort of compound was with cannabis. Growing up in California, it's like when you turn 15, 16, there's basically like a joint handed to you, right? So that was probably junior year in high school that I started to smoke cannabis, and probably did that almost every single day until junior or senior year in college. So probably 5 years I was smoking cannabis regularly every day. And to be honest, man, like most young people who are just smoking, you're kind of just doing it to do it. You're not doing it to really necessarily, at least in my experience, I wasn't doing it to like tap into more creativity or connect on a deeper level with myself or my intuition. I was just doing it because, quite frankly, I was a little insecure. And if it was something that I could do that was going to get more acceptance from others, I was going to do it. And, continued that in college. And to be honest, actually, in college, man, like my friends and I went to University of Oregon. We would get super high and then we would play basketball for like 3 hours, bro. It was fucking amazing. And then I remember, I think it was senior year of college, and I smoked before going to a party. And I just remember being so fucking paranoid. And I was like, this is just uncomfortable, right? And then from that point on, it was this similar type feeling I would experience. And I kind of unconsciously made the decision to stop smoking. Like for the last 10 years or 8 years, 9 years, like I haven't really smoked at all. And then also in college, I had an experience with mushrooms and one experience with LSD. Now, again, those experiences completely lacked intention. They were just to trip and get high. And I will say that that LSD experience senior year with some of my good friends from college was definitely super meaningful. I remember, bro, like sitting at the park and, Eugene, Oregon's one of the ultimate Frisbee capitals of the world. And I was like really good at throwing a Frisbee the normal way. But when it came to the other way, bro, I was just incapable. And I remember under the influence of LSD, just like chilling, like not even thinking, right? I was completely out of my head and I just flung it like this and it was a perfect toss. And I was like, holy shit, what is going on? So those were like the first experiences I had. And then really things started to shift in a massive way, July 2018. And that was when I took a trip to Peru by myself and felt this deep calling to sit with ayahuasca. Man, those experiences in Sacred Valley absolutely transformed the trajectory of my life in every single way imaginable. And we can go deeper into that if you'd like. But basically after those two initial ceremonies in Peru, and I saw all of these divine downloads that were happening, I saw other people around me going through this massive healing process and shedding of layers. It became very clear to me that these different indigenous medicines and plants and fungi were the answer. So after I came back to America following that trip, I was like, I want to learn more. I want to dive deeper into these different compounds. And, when I stumbled across psilocybin and started to really research the neuroscience, how it's impacting the brain, how it's allowing people to heal generational traumas, heal autoimmune diseases, like do more root cause work than any of these prescription pills and medications can ever do. I was like, wow, this is really powerful. And one of the things, Ryan, that inspired me on that journey was my older brother at the time, who's 5 years older than me. He, for the last 2 decades, had basically been crippled by depression, addiction, and it really destroyed our relationship. And in Peru, sitting with ayahuasca, a lot of stuff came up regarding my relationship with my brother. And I made the decision that I really want to take ownership of that relationship and do whatever I can to help heal whatever resentment there is there or whatever friction and tension is there, and really help my brother heal and do so in a holistic way that's connecting him to himself, connecting him to nature, rather than disconnecting him with all these pharmaceutical drugs that he was being pushed that clearly weren't working, right? So when I started to dive deeper into the research of mushrooms, it became very clear that I wanted to pursue this path for myself and just see, hey, what's going to come up, right? And I remember my buddy handing me like a little stem and he's like, bro, take this. It was before a cacao ceremony. And he's like, bro, you're going to love this. And I took it and I just remember like feeling so expansive with my heart and so open. And from that point forward, at the end of 2019, I really started to take it more seriously in regards to implementing a microdosing protocol with mushrooms. It's funny because early 2020, before the pandemic even started, I remember going on a bike ride in Miami Beach, just being so tapped into everything around me. The blades of grass were so green. The sky was just this beautiful bluish hue that was so magnetic and powerful. And the birds chirping was like this sweet symphony for my soul. And I realized at that moment how much I lacked gratitude and how much I lacked the appreciation for these little things on a day-to-day basis. Since that moment, I was like, this is real. This has a lot of powerful potential. Granted, I'm not someone who's suffering with debilitating anxiety or depression, but I see how it can really impact me and take my quality of life to the next level. And I started sharing it shortly thereafter with some of my one-on-one clients. And most of them are executives, entrepreneurs, founders, which, as you know, can be very stressful. And then you throw on top of that being a parent, being a partner, and trying to do your best to manage and balance all of these while being present in the process. It's very hard. It's very challenging. And they were all just experiencing so many breakthroughs and positive benefits from the medicine. And I was like, I need to share this with more people. And then started in 2021 to just share it way more openly on social media. And my first TikTok post hit like 6 million views. And it just became very clear, bro, that so many people are struggling. So many people are suffering. And they're not being provided with real solutions that can help them address the root cause of some of their dysfunction and dis-ease. So at the end of 2021, started the Microdosing Mastermind, and almost 2 years in, we've served over 200 students in there. And it's just been beautiful, bro. Like, and the cool thing about it is we're just getting started. I really feel that way, that I'm just getting started in my own journey and really becoming more connected to myself and learning more about myself and shedding different layers and emotional wounds that I still have in my life. And also it's the beginning of the movement, you know? So really excited, man. I know that was a long answer to your question, dude, but hopefully it provided more clarity.
That was perfect. I loved that answer because it does provide so much context and clarity surrounding, like, my favorite question to ask is the why, right? Like, what is the why behind this? Because without the why, the how and the what really don't matter, right? And I think, you know, when we really tap into the idea of dharma or any of these kind of terminologies, it really rests in our ability to really understand our why and also be aware of when that why shifts a little bit and how we can expand that. And that's what I really love about your mastermind is, you know, we have a very similar approach in terms of like, hey, there might be potentially like a relationship with a plant or fungus, et cetera, that is going to help you in this, but it's not like that's going to do all the work for you, right? Like, you still need to be able to have a healthy body, a healthy mind, mindset work, exercise, whatever all these other tools are to be able to allow that teacher to teach you to deeper degrees. And then also you need the support to make sure you can integrate thereafter, you know, and I think those things are so important, man, you know, and you know, you mentioned briefly that ayahuasca trip, right? And I had read about that on your website too. What would you say the most profound, or maybe the one that stuck with you the longest? What is like the biggest download you got from that ceremony in particular?
Yeah, bro. It's so true what you said, by the way. I literally just like opened up a Google Doc to take a note because like I love the way you just use the word teacher. You know, I think that's really, really amazing.
Hell yeah.
Yeah, bro. I would say the first night, honestly. The first night, sitting with ayahuasca, I get a tap on my shoulder in the middle of the ceremony, and it's Nicki Minaj in my experience, right? In my experience. And she's like, hey, Jeremy. I'm like, Nicki, what are you doing here? And she's like, yeah, I've been watching you. And I'm like, what do you mean you've been watching me? She's like, you're really dope, man. You have a powerful message to share with the world. And I want to give you my platform to share it with my fans, with my audience. Let's do an Instagram live together, just like 30 minutes. And I'm like, are you serious right now, Nicki? She's like, yeah, like, let's go. And I was like, okay. She's like, yeah, don't trip. Don't worry. Like just share what's ever on your heart. So bro, in this experience, granted, for anyone listening, and Ryan, I don't know if you've sat with Aya, but you're not typically supposed to like just be speaking out loud, right? Because that can potentially disturb other people's experience. So anyways, in my experience, I think I'm doing this Instagram live with Nicki Minaj, and I am just speaking, dude. I'm just channeling from source, and probably 20 or 30 minutes of doing that. 3 or 4 hours later, after the ceremony's done and the 15 or 16 of us are reconvening in the kitchen just to have a light bite to nourish ourselves after the ceremony, 7 or 8 of the people came up to me separately and they're like, bro, those words that you spoke were so powerful. You have no idea how much you just expanded my perspective and made my experience that much more meaningful. And I'm like, wow, like really? What? So this was so crazy, bro. I literally have goosebumps right now, like sharing this with you. Like, I don't know if you can see.
Dude, but, yeah, I can see them. Those are real goosebumps, people.
But it was crazy, man, because up until then, I was 27 years old at the time. I was pretty hesitant to speak my truth. I still had an addiction to external validation. And I hadn't cultivated the confidence yet to really share my heart. And prior to that, during that time, I was a personal trainer. So I feel like a lot of my self-worth was just attached to my physical body. I feel like deep inside, man, I knew I had something really powerful to share with the world, but I just didn't know how to go about doing it. And that experience completely just opened up so much possibility. And then going back home and right away, just like, okay, how can I integrate this? How can I start creating more? How can I start being more authentic? How can I start, tapping into my heart more frequently? Started my podcast shortly thereafter and kind of just been on this journey ever since, bro.
Dude, I love that, man. It's like very familiar once again to my own story, because basically I had a catalyzing moment in 2019 during an MDMA ceremony, actually. And that MDMA ceremony led me to immediately start the podcast, start the business, et cetera. So it's funny how like those things can just shift something in you. And, I've done a lot of different spiritual things, a lot of different modalities that have all been great. And I believe that the biggest shifts I've ever made have been after plant medicine ceremonies, right? Even if it's not necessarily plant medicine in the sense of like MDMA, but in these types of ceremonies, right? And it is a very interesting phenomenon. And that's one of the most interesting things about, for me, like the mastermind, being able to witness these types of things happening to other people. Like, I'm curious if you have one story or anything that sticks out to you from your own mastermind, like the people you've worked with, of just like a transformation that you've seen one of your clients go through, because, I'm always fascinated, and it continues to expand my horizons so as to what's possible. And my hope with asking this question is that someone listening goes, holy shit, that's possible too. And so I'm curious if anything pops up for you when I ask that question of like a big transformation or anything that really just stands out. Hey, everybody. I hope you're enjoying the show. I wanted to take a quick moment to let you all know that the doors are officially open for the Conscious Cannabis Collective. And as such, this is the last week you can sign up and receive all of the bonuses we're currently including. This is the last time I will be personally onboarding those of you who sign up with a complimentary one-on-one session, and you'll have the ability to get the Grow with Cannabis course for free during this limited time. For more info on how you can take advantage of this offer, head down to the show notes for this episode and secure your spot today, as we only have so many spots left and they are filling up quickly. Now back to the show.
For sure. I would say, honestly, the first one that pops out is one of the one-on-one clients I was working with before I launched the mastermind. And bro, he was a 13-year heroin addict. Wow. And he had tried basically everything under the sun. And this guy was like a high-level executive at one of the biggest tech companies in the world. And was such a high-functioning person. But every month or so, he would go on these benders. He would almost kill himself sometimes. And it was like destroying him. It was destroying his relationship. It was destroying his confidence because he lacked so much like self-esteem because he would always resort back to this thing. And he had tried everything, bro, rehab multiple times, counseling, therapy, all of that. And after implementing microdosing consistently, along with the other like habits and rituals that we teach, right? Mastering your morning routine, your body's biology, cleaning up your gut, all of these things that are potentially driving inflammation. Like it was just night and day. And I just actually spoke to him like 2 weeks ago just to like check in, and he's doing so well, man. And it's so great to see that. And like, that is such a powerful reminder, sometimes even lately, I've been going through these waves where I'm like, dude, I feel like I'm just pouring out so much. Am I really creating the impact that I want, that I desire? And I go through those moments. It's like recalling stories like that kind of help me anchor in. And then, early on in the mastermind, like early 2022, we had a 24-year-old kid named Marcos. He had an Adderall addiction. He was suicidal. Granted, I didn't know this. I didn't know he was snorting lines of Adderall. I didn't know he was suicidal prior to starting. He had mentioned that he was diagnosed with ADHD, that he was taking Adderall, but it wasn't until he recorded his testimonial after that I found out he was suicidal and snorting lines of Adderall, right? And within 6 weeks, he was completely weaned off safely and just feeling so much more connected to himself. And he he turned his side hustle and passion into like a real business, and like he's thriving now. It's so cool to like witness that, right? And dude, those are just like the first two that come to mind. It's been really, really humbling to see the impact. And, I work with, again, a lot of people who have busy lives, right? They're parents most of the time. They are either running their own company or they're high up at a company that they work for. And man, they're busy, they're stressed out. And it's like to see the transformation, even as something of like, hey, this is how I used to respond to a situation, like getting super triggered, getting super reactive, getting super emotional with a spouse or with your children. And now just having that perspective and that more grounded attitude and that more calm nervous system. So you're not just being triggered and reactive all the time. You're able to respond in a more intentional, loving, kind, compassionate way. Like that is just a massive shift. And you might not be able to measure that in a study, but it's like, wow, that is like across the board. The biggest thing I've noticed is, people just really tapping into more presence, getting out of their head and really starting to cultivate unconditional love for themselves. And when you start to do those things, a lot of the other shit starts to figure itself out, right? Because I would argue that like basically every disease or every illness is a product of a lack of self-love in some aspect, which drives a certain behavior or it leads to a certain habit that doesn't serve us. So yeah, man, those are just a couple. And then broadly speaking, I would say that's been a huge shift I've noticed.
Oh, man, I love that. And I also, you drew attention to a couple really important things. The first one I'm going to mention is actually the second one, and then I'll go back to the first one. But the first one was the idea that like, these more qualitative aspects of life are hard to measure in like the typical medical model or like scientific model. Yet it does not mean they do not exist, right? And some of them are so much more profound than you could ever measure on a study. Like for instance, right, Joe Dispenza's work. When he has someone go through a transcendental experience, that looks like gamma waves, right? Like not that exciting on just a graph, right? It's the person going through it that adds the depth to like what that experience is, right? And I think that there's like part of this work with plant medicines that is always going to be a little challenging to be able to articulate to those who don't understand, because so much of it is directly related to experience. And the only way you can know is by having at least your own experience to at least compare it to and be like, okay, I've been in that space before, right? But what is it, right? And so for a lot of the people in the world right now that are like, well, tell me more about it. It's like, well, that's like trying to explain what an apple is like by understanding pectin. It's like eventually you're going to have to eat a fucking apple if you want to know what an apple is, right? Like no amount of science will allow you to make up for that, And so that was one thing that I thought was really cool that you drew attention to. And then the other thing too that, really bears repeating is this idea that like there are going to be these times where you fall into challenges yourself, right? Because what is business? Everything is spiritual, right? When you really look at it that way, right? So in a way, how I think of business or anything is just like spiritual growth. So of course, there are going to be times where you realize certain patterns of like really exactly what you said, all stemming from a lack of self-love, right? Different shades or flavors of what that is, maybe lack of courage or whatever, but it all goes back to like a crinked line of self-love, And so being able to admit that, right? And being able to lead from that vulnerable place is something else you and I share in common, because I found early on that it was way too challenging to try to believe that I had all the answers, and also to try to like make it seem as though I never had a challenging day or these kind of things. Like actually, like the best leaders are the ones that are like, I'm right down there with you doing the work, like I'm no different. I might just be the guy that started the Zoom room, but like we're all on this journey together. And I really love that, man, because it comes through in your energy, how much you care and how much you're willing to wear your heart in your sleeve, not only for yourself, most importantly, but also for those you serve and just the world at large. And, that's what I refer to as like being a lighthouse, like my ultimate intention every day is to be a lighthouse for others, right? Whether it's just smiling at someone when I hold the door, whether it's like cracking a joke with my friend, whether it's doing my sacred work when it comes to the collective or whatever, it's like being able to be that lighthouse is everything. And I love that about you, man. It's really cool.
Thank you, brother. I appreciate that, man. We're just a reflection of each other. So yeah, but no, I really, everything that you said is so spot on. So spot on. So I think it's really important to kind of like recalibrate and understand, like we're going through this process too. We're able to kind of facilitate and lead and help guide people. But ultimately, we're also going through our own process and our own journey. And like last night was a full moon, right?
Yeah.
Last night was a full moon. I was like, you know what? I'm going to take a gram, which is a little more than a microdose, but it's not enough to like go crazy, right? So I took a gram and then took a beautiful hot bath with candles. And I just allowed myself to sit, and no distraction, no music, no journal, nothing. And dude, like the stuff that was coming up was really profound. It was like different blockages that were still present, still things that I need to address, that maybe I didn't allow myself the time and space to fully process. So yeah, man, it's one of those things. And like, again, the more that I learn, the more that I unlearn. And the more that I learn, like, man, just a student for life,
Dude, 100%, and it's like, I love that idea of like, the more I learn, the less I know type thing, and it's like, it really reminds me of that quote, wise is the man who knows he does not know. And that is like one of the funniest things about pretty much any psychedelic experience I have, right? Even with cannabis, right? It's like that moment of hilarity when you realize what a thirst trap it has been your entire life to think that it matters whether or not you quote unquote know something, because nothing is objective, right? And so like as Hermetic states, like the universe is mental, so it's all subjective. So like there really is no right or wrong at all. And it's just such a thirst trap to even think that we have to figure that out. And like that moment of hilarity is so healing, because the amount of pressure that can come off, right? And I imagine that's what you were feeling last night when you took that gram and you're in that bath and you're just like feeling the weight just lift off of you, And then also like with the tools you have, with the processes you have, you know how to integrate that when you come back, so that like that becomes like a new level of that which your nervous system can hold as well, And I think that's one of the coolest things too about, continuing to integrate and then go back in, integrate, go back in. And, it's really fascinating. I've spoken to people like Hamilton Souther about that. And, he's done experiences where he does ayahuasca 100 days in a row, and just like, then he goes into a deep integration session after, and I'm like, I don't know if that's my path, but it is interesting to see, these types of individuals like yourself, like me, like Hamilton, like I imagine everyone listening right now, that for some reason just really enjoy messing with their consciousness. Like it's very interesting.
Yeah. And with that being said too, it's something that I always make sure to mention is that microdosing mushrooms, LSD, MDMA, cannabis, like ayahuasca, all of these things can be valuable teachers, right? Mm. I mean, they've played a valuable role in my life. And I think they have the potential to impact everyone in a positive way. But with that being said, we're still humans and we like to fuck good things up. So, when I hear about someone doing ayahuasca 100 days in a row, or, even someone microdosing 100 days in a row, it's like, it's no longer becoming a medicine, right? It's now a drug and you're becoming dependent on it. You're not treating it, in my opinion, in the sacred way that it should be. Now, if it's for experimental purposes, I guess that's a different conversation. But just in general, I see it all the time, and I'm sure you do too. It's like very easy, man, to chase like the next breakthrough or the next psychedelic experience. So for me, I'm always checking in with myself. And it's like, hey, are you maintaining that level of reverence? And that's what it comes down to for me, right? And I always, mention that to my community and our people in the mastermind. It's like we have a very specific protocol that we microdose on Monday, Wednesday, and Fridays. We never microdose 2 days in a row. And the reason for that is a few things. Number one, your tolerance won't really build like this. I've been microdosing with the same exact amount for the last 3.5 years. Number two, you don't become dependent on it, right? More so psychologically, right? Because psilocybin is 100% safe and non-addictive, but a lot of people psychologically become dependent on things, especially, in our mastermind, I've helped a lot of people safely wean off drugs like Adderall, antidepressants, SSRIs, where they take them every single day, and then it requires a bigger dose, and then it makes it even harder and harder to ever wean off of these things, right? So I have to always just remind myself and remind our community, like, listen, this is a powerful medicine that needs to be treated with a lot of respect and intention if we want to get the most out of it.
Oh, definitely, man. Like the amount of overuse I've seen, and also that, like, I've gone through in the past with cannabis and not really too many other psychedelics. Luckily, they've always hit me so hard. They never became like a psychological addiction. They were always too aggressive in terms of effect to be like something I'd want to do that often. But with cannabis, on the other hand, I definitely fell into my patterns of escapism with that. And that's a whole part of my journey is, taking full ownership and accountability surrounding the fact that it wasn't actually the plant, the same way you're saying, right? It's like we got to take addiction. I mean, we got to take accountability for our own dependencies and where those dependencies stem from. Because I also tell people, like, if you feel you're addicted to cannabis, don't look at cannabis and getting off of cannabis as the answer, right? Because all that cannabis is as the coping strategy that's helping you cover up whatever the actual thing is, right? So we got to figure out, first of all, what that thing is. And when we learn how to connect with, say, cannabis, psilocybin, et cetera, the same thing we use to tune out can be the thing we use to tune in, right? And dive deeper into something. And I think that's really important because, again, like, very similar to psilocybin, right? Like I always say, we never got a manual for cannabis, right? We never got a manual for psychedelics. I mean, sometimes right now, like there are certain studies coming out, but a lot of the medical models I just don't vibe with personally. And so, you've heard people like for instance, for you, like your microdosing protocol you just did, you got the Stamets one, like there are certain protocols coming out, but all suffice to say, like we really don't know a lot about these medicines yet, right? And so being able to have communities like yours that are teaching people the right habits, right? Like I won't even say right, like beneficial habits, put it that way, right? Habits that are going to teach them how to utilize this medicine for a lifetime without having to become dependent on it, right? That's exactly what I do with cannabis too, man. It's amazing. And, again, it's like it can be very psychologically addicting because when you're looking at something that can shift your state, right? And especially if you're living in a state of discomfort and you're seeking a state of comfort, and then you psychologically attribute this thing that shifts your state into that more comfortable state, well, now you've just made a 2 and 2 equals 4 type thing where actually now like that thing is going to represent something that is very addicting in your life, such as comfort, happiness, joy, etc. So yeah, man, It's so amazing to be able to chat with other people about this stuff because it's so important to get this out there in the current popularization around the medicines. You know, it's like, I'm grateful, but at the same time, like, let's make sure that we actually like can get something really powerful from this and shift the entire consciousness of the planet for future generations. It's really cool.
Yeah. We'll talk about this more whenever you come on my show too, but I'm curious to know for you, do most of the people that you work with, are they like addicted to cannabis and they're trying to build a healthier relationship with it?
Yeah, it's about half and half, actually. At first, I thought it would be like kind of like my main client, the person who's currently dependent, wants to get off, because that's been a lot of my journey. But then actually, like, I realized, like, oh, that was like the first half of my journey. The second half of my journey, which makes sense of why I'm calling in these people now, are more like, hey, I'm a spiritual seeker. I have connected with cannabis maybe in the past. Maybe I'm brand new to it, but it's never been a big theme in my life. But I saw something you said and now I'm resonating with it. And I want to learn like the best way to utilize it, you know, like the self-development junkie, like that kind of individual. So it's about half and half. Yeah.
Oh, that's cool.
Is it for you like people that are coming in dependent on, let's say, even cannabis or something different, or people that are like, well, like what are some of the main types of people you see? I'm curious too.
Yeah. So definitely, especially early on, I kind of mentioned some of those success stories with Marcos and a couple other people who had been taking antidepressants their whole life and were able to safely wean off with our unique protocols and practices. So as I shared those stories, naturally, like those type of people were like, oh, wow, like if they can do it, maybe I can do it too. So, you know, we've helped a lot of people in that journey. And in addition to that, man, like so many successful people I know who are like entrepreneurs and like, dude, they're basically addicted to cocaine. And what I mean by that is like a lot of them are taking Adderall every day. And if you look at brain scans of people that do cocaine and people that do methamphetamines like Adderall or Ritalin, it's essentially impacting and destroying their brain in a very similar way, right? Like with the frontal lobe and the dopamine center. So yeah, that's like a popular one, bro. Like in these people, so there's that dynamic. And again, this is something that came up when I was in the bath last night, is like really all addiction. All addiction for me. And I'm grateful that I've never suffered with like the classical addiction to alcohol, drugs, pornography, gambling, sex, like, you know, but I still have had an addiction to external validation, right? Which will kind of manifest in interesting ways. So I was just thinking last night about like, where am I looking outside of myself to feel whole, right? And for me, like there's still things that are showing up. And that's really what I was able to kind of pinpoint, like whether it's Adderall, whether it's alcohol, whether it's the vape, whether it's porn, whether it's just constantly distracting yourself from being with yourself. So a lot of those things, right? A lot of the vape, a lot of Adderall, a lot of quote unquote ADHD, right? And a lot of the reason why people are doing those things, right, is yes, they want to improve their focus and productivity. And also a big reason why, you know, if people were sleeping well, they might not need to take Adderall. If people were eating right and sleeping well and moving their bodies consistently, they might just be high on their own supply, right? It's really like getting to the root cause of why they're chasing this feeling that they can't tap into themselves, and really empowering them with the belief like you actually have it all within you already. And I always tell everyone I work with, like, you are the medicine, right? Like you are the medicine, and the medicine helps kind of connect you to that inner power and potential that I believe we all have within us. And then finally, I would say, you know, I've recently been doing some collaborations with athletes who have brain injuries. They've had traumatic brain injuries, concussions. They don't want to be on fucking painkillers, bro. They don't want to die off oxy, and these other crazy things that happen to be legal, which is so mind-boggling.
It's nuts.
Yeah. So them worked with veterans, and recently just had actually a full mastermind that was just actually separate from my normal one. That was a microdosing mastermind for moms.
Oh, cool.
Yeah. And again, women are much more likely to be depressed than men just because of the neurological aspects. They produce less serotonin. postpartum depression is real. Yeah. So that was kind of an interesting experiment I tried. Parents, leaders, entrepreneurs who want to feel better, perform better, and just really become more connected to themselves, man, their intuition, their passions, their purpose. And I think that's something that, most people truly desire, but very few people are actually willing to do like that deeper work that it requires.
Yeah, 100%. That was perfectly stated. Yeah. And it makes sense that those are the kind of people that would find you too, right? Like, they're seeing your content, they're seeing themselves, right, in your journey and things like that. And it's so amazing, man, to see people be able to empower themselves like that. I mean, it's really amazing. And one of my favorite things about mastermind format too is people start standing out. People start like, realizing like, oh, I could help this person, right? And so like they're asking or answering questions and, supporting in the community. And I love things like that, and I think like one of the biggest things I've noticed too around people that are choosing to be courageous enough to do the work and tap into all this stuff, like otherwise messy stuff is, it inspires the people around you, and I think that's one of the most important things too. And, one of my ultimate intentions is always to leave people with something they can take, from each episode and each thing I do in the world that they can go empower themselves with. And, I'm curious for you, like, what is one of the best habits you've seen, right? This could be something to do with a microdosing protocol. This could also be something just completely different, right? That has helped you out in your life alongside microdosing protocols and these types of things. Because one of the big things I'm always talking about, like we talked about a little bit earlier, is like, this idea that like the medicine can give you the what, but you got to figure out the how, And so like, that how includes like building new habits and trying new things out. And so, I want people to be able to take something away from this that they can immediately go try out, And so what is like one habit you've noticed is like super big in your life to continue being able to show up?
Great question, Ryan. So, I mean, honestly, dude, like last night, I know I mentioned it a couple of times already, taking this bath, right? And it wasn't just like a bath, but it was like, okay, yes, I took a gram of mushrooms, but it was, infusing it with essential oils, a lavender bath bomb, Epsom salt, lighting up candles, like really creating an experience for myself. And normally, I'll try to get some reading done or like be productive in the bath, right? And by just allowing myself to sit there and fucking sweat in the hot water, dude, a lot of shit came up. And I realized like that I really haven't given myself enough time and space to do that in the last couple months. And I feel like that was driving. I'm someone that is very outgoing and extroverted. And I also need that time by myself, like every day, to really just connect with my thoughts and with the madness that is my mind, right? And if I don't get that time, or if I don't make that time intentionally, like it just leads to me not being the best version of myself. So that was just a reminder for me to like give myself 60 minutes, phone on airplane mode, where I'm able to be fully present with myself and just allow anything to come through. And I did the same thing this morning. I walked to my favorite coffee shop, first thing in the morning. And I was like, it was just my pen, my notebook, and just some really good stuff was coming to the surface. And that would probably, honestly, at this moment for me, like be the thing that's really valuable. And it's so challenging to do in the world we live in, right? It becomes harder and harder. There's that. And then I guess the second one would be, man, just really connecting to nature. And in Miami, it's super flat, right? But I live in Miami Beach. I live a 5-minute walk away from the beach. And like, I've been intentional the last month and a half since returning from travel of like just walking to the ocean, jumping in, and feeling the sun kiss my face, feeling the salt water soothe me. And man, it's so healing. I always just feel so much better after I do that. And, obviously, we could dive deep into like nutrition protocols, morning routines, biohacking type shit on another conversation. But, For me, those two are the like lowest hanging fruit, right?
Yeah.
There's no excuse. Like anyone can do those things. Hopefully you have some access to nature, whether it's a grass field, whether it's, but that shit matters, man. And I just see it. I was traveling in Europe all of July and I just see, man, like the people are happier there. It's undeniable. It's undeniable, bro. And they're not all microdosing. That's not why they're happier. They're happier because they're moving their bodies. They're just walking more. They're connecting with loved ones in a more meaningful way. They're eating real whole foods, not a bunch of processed artificial garbage. And I feel like they're just more connected to the land. And those are just some observations. But yeah, man, sit with yourself. Like that's what literally, like, again, another download I had last night in the bathtub is I was like, oh, wow, why haven't I been doing this lately? Why haven't I been the intentional person that I am and spending more time really making sure I'm connected with myself in silence? And I was like, oh, like I've been going through challenges and like I haven't been at my best this last month in terms of like my mindset and like my like level of inspiration and enthusiasm. And I was like, oh, because I'm not liking myself as much, I'm probably avoiding sitting with myself. So now when I'm going on bike rides, instead of like not listening to anything and just allowing myself to consciously connect to my breath, I'm like drowning it out with a podcast, with the music. And there's nothing wrong with that. I love both of those things, especially this new Russ album that I'm just listening to on repeat.
Yes.
But yeah, bro, I'm very clear that for me is like such a significant aspect of well-being, sitting with myself and giving myself that time and space.
Dude, 100%. I mean, it's funny, man. One other similarity is, I've definitely been feeling that the last couple of months too. Very similar, right? Like, actually Rachel, my partner, and I, we just changed up our entire nighttime routine because we realized like, oh shit, like we've actually been in a cycle of kind of avoiding ourselves, right? And using each other to enable that. So we turned that around, and a lot of what our nighttime is now is just sitting, stretching, breathing, etc. And it's been amazing just what it's done for my mental state, going to bed earlier as well, because I had started to creep into like the 11:30 again. I'm like, no, get that back to 10, and so, it's like, getting those things back in order, because I've always had a nice, rise ritual, but it's usually my nighttime one where I am a night owl, right? So it's very exciting for me to want to stay up and get into all these things, but yeah, it can be challenging, because if you don't find time to sit with yourself, and also like you're doing your sacred work all day, right? Talking a lot and all these things, it can be really easy to bypass the necessity to sit with oneself when you have the logical excuses why. Like, well, I do have busy days. Well, I do have these things. It's like, yeah. And that's exactly what the part of you that doesn't want you to sit with yourself would want you to think, And then nature, 100%, right? Nature harmonizes, like nature is, the thing for me that anytime I go into nature, even if it's just a park, even if it's literally just like, the newest biohacking trend, which is earthing, right? I always think it's hilarious. Like the new biohacking trends, like, you're going to sun gaze, maybe perineum or perennium sunning is like the newest one. But, it's like these things that are so natural, but like they're kind of like new age now. But even if it's just earthing, right? Like being able to connect back to the Schumann resonance, being able to supercharge your body with that, it's amazing, And so I love those tips, man. They're super useful. And you're right. Anyone should be able to do those. At least if you're listening to this episode, you should be able to put it that way.
For sure, man. Yeah. It's really just getting back to the basics when it comes down to it. Yeah. It's simplifying shit. That's what I'm realizing. The more complex my life gets, I'm like, fuck, dude, just simplify things. Like I tend to let myself get overwhelmed by like everything I want to create and everything I have going on. And I'm like, bro, take a fucking breath, dude. Like take a fucking breath. And that's kind of where I'm at in this process. I'm really excited, like to start a new month for everyone who's listening and watching right now. Like we're recording this on the last day of August. So I'm really excited to like start a fresh month, Virgo season. And yeah, bro, big things coming.
Do you have Virgo in your charts?
Yeah, dude, my birthday is September 10th.
Oh, dude. So you're a Virgo. That's awesome. Hell
Yeah.
yeah. I get along with Virgos really well because I'm an Aries, Virgo. So my moon and rising are both Virgo. So I have a lot of it in me.
Hey, let's go.
That's amazing, man. It's so funny too because, for me, my partner's really into astrology, human design, gene keys, all the systems. And it's been a very amazing and fascinating way to categorize, and in a way that doesn't limit, because like labels, for instance, like those feel limiting, whereas astrology actually feels expansive because it shows you, at least for me, like the ways in which to think about certain energy people have, and it's very much more cooking than baking. And so that's awesome, man. Didn't know you were a Virgo.
Yeah. When's your birthday?
Mine's March 28th. Yep.
Got it.
Yep.
I would be interested to ask you actually, but we can do this another time because I'm currently upgrading like my onboarding process for bringing people on my team, and I want to include like some of these different personality tests. Like, what would you think, based on your experience, would be like able to kind of capture someone the most? And I know they all have like their different strengths and weaknesses.
Yeah, that is a great question. For me, human design has been like the one that I'm most into. So maybe I'm biased, but it's been the one that I know other people that use human design specifically for like this intake type process. And to me, it just seems very accurate. The other thing that Rachel uses is an app called the Pattern app. And that one I found to be very accurate as well. And that's like more based on just astrology and birth charts and things like that. So either one of those systems I found to be like the most accurate so as it pertains to the people that I put through it, So yeah, those two are really good.
And those are both pretty simple, right?
Yeah.
To like implement.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Like
That's
human
good to
design.
know.
Yeah. Like you don't need to like, you could really understand most aspects of it by reading the human design book. I have it like right somewhere over there, but you could really understand enough to be able to like, do a really good understanding of someone's chart just by what you learn in there. I mean, you're going to learn about the profile type, you're going to learn about the numbers or like, the split definition type thing.
How big's that book? Ryan?
Not big. It's about that thick right there. So I literally read it in an afternoon. And the story was I went to one of Paul Chek's events and I went with a bunch of friends from Boston. So we all went out there and rented a big house. And the day after the Chek event, we woke up in the morning and I went to Carlsbad to go to this crystal shop. And I got drawn to the book section, which usually I'm an audiobook guy just because I'm always moving, right? So I just get drawn back there and I see this book. I grab it, I buy it, I go back to the house, and we have a bunch of people over from the workshop. Now, I, like you, am a very extroverted person, right? So all of a sudden, I notice that I am just entrenched in this book for 7 hours, just sitting on the couch while a party happens around me. And that's when I was like, okay, there's something here, And so that book, I literally read it in an afternoon, and it taught me a lot about human design. It's by Shaitan Parkin, I believe is how you pronounce his name. But yeah, and for everyone listening, grab this book. It's really good.
Well, I'm glad I asked you.
Oh yeah.
I'm glad I asked you. Yeah.
I think it's a great process. Like I'm planning on implementing it for the CCC as well, like as an intake process, like, hey, give me your birth time and everything like that so I can run your chart and see who I'm chatting with, because that's my goal. I'm always curious, to run kind of like these unofficial studies of like, what are the people that most resonate with the particular message I'm putting out there? Are they falling into one category, like all projectors, let's say from human design, or is it, all different types of, types, but the same numbers, maybe a 5-1 or 6-2, it's very interesting to see those stats. And I don't exactly know what to make of it yet, but it is very interesting to start noticing those correlations for sure.
Well, I officially ordered that book, bro. So
Dude,
I'm glad I asked.
Hell yeah. That's integration in real time for everyone listening, right? That's how we can do it.
Yeah. Now it's just about making the time and space to read the book.
Exactly.
But I'm committed.
Hell yeah. Jeremy, I know also that right now you're about to put out a new free course, if I understand correctly. And from what I also understand from you, it's got a shit ton of stuff in there that the people listening would want to hear about. So I'd love if you could share a little bit about that, where people can find it, and also where they can find you, where they can keep up on all the things that you got going on. Give us all the deets, my man.
Dude, I appreciate you, brother. And like,
I got you.
I mentioned to you before this, but like, I would love to record with you whenever you come to Miami.
Yes.
I'm doing all my podcasts like in person now, just because like that's really what I feel like nourishes me at this moment. Yeah, dude. So September 10th, man, is my 33rd birthday. And I was like, what can I do to make this birthday extra fucking epic? And I decided that I wanted to just launch something really special. And I created basically, it's like 30 videos, bro. It's 30 videos diving deep into microdosing, just educating people on what microdosing is, safe ways to implement this, and also talking about different aspects of the pharmaceutical industry and how these different drugs like Adderall, like antidepressants impact you on a neurological level, and really just giving people tools, man, to take ownership of their health and of their healing and of their happiness, right? So my mastermind's like a pretty decent investment to get involved. So I was like, dude, I want to create something that literally gives every single human access to this information. And if they decide to pursue microdosing, amazing. If they just get their curiosity piqued, amazing. But literally, I don't know anyone who has offered and created something like that has this much value. Literally, can't even tell you how much time and energy my team and I have put into creating this. And it's launched September 10th. So the day of my birthday, it's going live. The wait list is live right now. Magicofmicrodosing.com, Magic of Microdosing, and Ryan will link it in the show notes. And yeah, bro, like I really recommend for anyone who wants to just learn more about this and educate themselves, because even if you don't feel like this path is for you, like if it's not something you necessarily want to pursue, like chances are you have a family member, you have a loved one who's struggling right now and who could probably benefit a lot from this work. So, think of that person, go to magicofmicrodosing.com and dude, like get this. It's fucking, I poured my heart and soul into this. You'll get lifetime access to all of the content. There's no gimmicks. There's no tricks. Like it's literally just my gift to the world on my birthday. And then in terms of following me, I have the Thrive University podcast. And then also Jeremy.awakens is my Instagram handle. So, I'm on all the other platforms, but if you go there, you'll be able to kind of navigate and see me everywhere. Dude. Yeah, bro, this was fucking phenomenal. I'm really grateful for this conversation, and I hope people got some value from it.
Dude, I know they did. I got a lot of value from this for sure, and I'm super excited to make my way down to Miami to do your show with you. And, I always say to people, it's so weird, but I've never been to Florida. I've been like just so many places, right? Travel all over the place. But for some reason, I've never gone to the number one place for destination, getaways that people from Boston go to in the winter, right? Which is Florida. So I am excited to get it down there. My marketing team is actually in Claremont, Florida. So it's really funny, man. I got a bunch of connections down there. So I'm really excited to get down there. And Jeremy, I got one last question for you, my man. And that question is this. Let's say someone listens to this episode and is extremely excited to look into psychedelic medicines in their own life. What is the one piece of advice you would give them to be able to allow them to use the proper discernment in choosing whether or not these medicines are right for them in their experience of life?
Great question again. I would say start slow and start small. Again, it's really important to cultivate a really mindful, intentional, respectful relationship with whatever it is you're doing. And I even say this with alcohol, man. Alcohol is the most widely abused drug in the world. Right? But somehow it's been normalized. And with that being said, I choose not to drink alcohol very often, but when I do, I'm super intentional about it. Like I enjoy every sip. I make sure that it is usually like with a friend or with someone to just enjoy it together with, right? And it's really about cultivating that relationship. So starting slow and starting small, and also listening to yourself. If this conversation with Ryan and I piques your interest about microdosing psilocybin, amazing. Get my free course, learn more, educate yourself. And also don't feel obligated to do something just because it's trending. Like really tune in to that voice that you have, that we all have, but sometimes it gets dimmed through our programming and through becoming an adult, right? So really, really connect to that. And for me, it's all about getting out of our heads and into our hearts, right? The more that we can really tap deeper into ourselves and our most authentic self, the better. And for me, mushrooms have been a great tool for that. And, I would just say that really start slow, start small, and document your journey for yourself. What are the subtle differences or improvements that you notice, and go in with very little expectations. Mm-hmm. Expectations really steal from people's experience, and going in with just an open mind and being open to the possibilities of maybe not feeling much of a difference or feeling something significant. You never know. So I know that was much more than one piece, but hopefully they were all relevant.
I always say, because, it's funny, usually, even when I get asked, like, what's the one thing, I'm like, I'm going to give you a couple, right? So I always say I'm never a rules guy. Like, I appreciate when people give more than one, because there are so many good ones out there. And I want people to be able to walk away with the most actionable ones possible that they can take. And the more that the guests give, the more they can take from it, And so I love that. And wow, ladies and gents, when I was first connected to Jeremy recently and looked into his story, I was immediately pumped to have the opportunity to have him on the show. For me, it is individuals like Jeremy who are devoted to their sacred work and are sharing it with the world in order to leave the Garden of Earth greener than when they found it that truly inspire me. And my hope is that each of you walked away from this episode with your inspiration meter full and your heart centered to open up to new possibilities in your experience of life. Jeremy, thank you so much for sharing your time and expertise on the show today, for daring to dream and having the courage to go all in on your sacred work, and for being such a source of inspiration for those who meet you to charge their batteries off of. And until next time, my brother, may your journey be smooth and full of light. Aho.